listening to the Project Ignite podcast,
where real digital entrepreneurs reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies to help you ignite and grow your online business.
ProjectIgnite.com. Your digital business starts here.
Now, here's your host, Derek Gale.
Welcome to another episode of the Project Ignite podcast. And today we're going to go into a topic that I absolutely love. And our guest is, well, he's an authority. This guy's been around for a very long time and is a very well-known, possibly one of the top authorities on building profitable client acquisition campaigns. And I'll tell you, before we started this interview, he said, go easy on the intro. I don't like gloating and stuff, but the guy has a reason to gloat because he has clients in 51 countries in 65 different niche verticals. He has helped engineer more 6- and 7-figure marketing campaigns than just about any other expert today. His client list is the who's A-list of entrepreneurs. So this guy has a right to brag. He's got an incredible agency that's behind some of the biggest direct response marketers. And so when you see these campaigns flowing through your Facebook feed, see it online, this is one of the brains behind that. So this is going to be an exciting interview. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Todd Brown to the show. Todd, thank you for being here.
I am thrilled. That intro, that kind of intro always makes me sound so much cooler than what I really am. You set the bar very high. And so I will attempt to get close to it.
All right. Well, you know what? I got to tell you though, I've always envied about you? Your beard.
Uh-oh.
You have an epic beard. And I'm a beard newbie. Like I just started like a year ago, and that's amazing.
I get it. I get that frequently from people, which is kind of funny because I always say you really never want to build a brand around facial hair because, right? Like, you know what I mean? Because if and when this thing gets mangled looking, I'm going to have to walk around with it. And I'm going to have to deal with it. And so,
right. I never thought about that. Yeah. It's you.
It's me. Like I have zero credibility without this beard. This beard it opens doors for me. I should start actually sending email campaigns from my beard.
That's actually a fantastic idea. I would probably open them faster than the ones from you. Like, I mean, that would
that tells you a lot right there, right? That sums it up right there, that would probably get a better engagement rate than the ones coming directly from me.
Oh, that's amazing. All right. Well, look, I want to get into the nitty gritty and pick your brain on a whole bunch of stuff here, but we were just talking, you've been on this show before and it was 5 freaking years ago. And honestly, it doesn't feel like it, because we haven't talked really since then. I mean, I get your emails all the time, but man, time flies. But for those of our listeners who aren't super familiar with us, give us the condensed version of who Todd Brown is and how did you become this expert behind the scenes running all these campaigns?
Yeah. So, look, I think I'm coming up to about 20 years in the world of direct response. So just about 2 decades. And to answer the second part of the question, first, I tell folks all the time, I think, look, if you study something enough, you do it enough for a long enough period of time, you will eventually get pretty darn good at it. And so it's been an amazing journey. Today, what we really focus on is really the same group or the same thing that we focused on 5 years ago in our original episode. And that is we work with, I would say, a little bit more sophisticated entrepreneurs, a little bit more sophisticated experts, if you will, and we help them to engineer customer acquisition campaigns and ongoing client or customer monetization. And so I have a method that we'll likely talk a little bit about that that I just kind of learned and developed over the years. And it's kind of become my go-to, my signature thing. I just have a different approach in terms of the way that I see marketing, which hopefully we'll get to talk about, and the construction of marketing campaigns. And so, we work with the folks that get, that want to grow a business the right way, grounded in direct response, and they want to put out campaigns that they're proud of, and not do anything sleazy or slimy.
So, okay, I had a question for you. So, when we spoke just 5 years ago, you were positioned as like the funnel king, right? But I've noticed in your language and stuff, it's all now about customer acquisition and customer
Yeah.
acquisition campaigns, and not really that language around funnels as much. What changed?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. And I want to share this with folks because I think we'll give some folks something to really think about. So let me go back for a second and let's talk a little bit about, right? All markets go through an evolution over time. They migrate from generalists to specialists. I talk about, there was a time when there was a town doctor and you went to that doctor regardless of whether you had a gunshot wound, a headache, or God forbid, cancer. And then of course, over time, like what happens in all markets, the market splinters. And then there was a general doctor, and then there was, a pediatrician, and then there was a pediatric neurosurgeon, and there was, right. And there's all these kind of this splintering over time. And so markets go through this evolution. And as they're going through this evolution, doors open up for more specific expertise. And right, what people look for is the pediatric neurosurgeon today, not just the town doctor, not just even the pediatrician. Recently, I heard somebody on YouTube talking about they got diagnosed with a thyroid cancer, and they sought out like a thyroid like oncology surgeon, like this ultra specific.
Yeah.
And right, so as markets evolve, right, we move more towards specialists. As those markets evolve, command more money, right? Opportunities open. Those specialists that fill those opportunities command more money. Today, my cardiologist gets paid a heck of a lot more than my general doctor does, even though the cardiologist is only focused on cardiology and the family doctor is focused on everything. And so I share that because many moons ago, when I first started working with entrepreneurs, there was a gap in the marketplace at the time that I saw. I saw that the idea of funnels was starting to become this mainstream in our space and our audience kind of word. People were talking about funnels, and there was yet to be anybody that put their flag in the ground to own that. And so that's exactly what it is that I did. Early on, I said, I'm going to put my flag down in the ground and I'm going to own that new kind of opportunity, right? And so then I put my flag in the ground, and then I really engineered. This is the reality, right? This is the truth. Like most positioning, I engineered everything else around that to support that flag in the ground. Well, of course, over time, lots and lots of folks have also now put their flag in the ground, most of which were my students or clients at some point, which is cool. God bless, God bless. And so I realized that as the market was becoming more sophisticated, there was this time when funnels were a new thing and totally like it was the buzz, it was the thing. Today, or even as of even just a couple of years ago, even really a year and a half ago, it became kind of commoditized. And so I looked for what was that next in the evolution of the market, that next slice of specialization that I really wanted to own. And so it was, client acquisition or customer acquisition in line with that, right? So now it's not just funnels. Like I've told people before, I've said like, look, this should hopefully help kind of crystallize this for folks listening. That, there are lots of folks that come to me and they say, I want to be a funnel expert, right? Number one, I always try to talk them out of it, right? Like you don't want to like get a, you don't want to do that. Like, but for the ones that have some chops and skills and they're like, look, I really want to do this. I say, you have to understand that right? The idea of just funnels in general, the general idea, the generalist of funnels, that's done. That's over, right? The market has now moved beyond that. So you either need to be the guy that helps people fix broken funnels, or you need to be the guy that is the e-commerce funnel person, or you need to be the person that is the average order value specialist. And that's where you're right. Cause it's splintering now. And so, right, like find that next splinter within the now commoditized general space of funnels. And so that's really what I did. And that was really not only my expertise, being able to engineer marketing campaigns that work with, cold traffic media buying to acquire new buyers. But I also knew that that was the biggest struggle for most online entrepreneurs, for most entrepreneurs in general, understanding the game of customer or client acquisition and being able to do it at scale and do it consistently and predictably. And so that's why I don't really use the word funnel anymore. And we talk more about campaigns for acquisition. That's why.
And so I think for all the listeners here, there's a valuable lesson in there in terms of so many markets. And I get this all the time. My students who come to me and say, "Oh, I want to, again, teach people internet marketing." Yeah, back in 1998, I taught people internet marketing.
Right.
But you're right. It's completely segmented and diversified again and again and again and again now, because it's such a broad area. So, whatever business you're in, I think you need to look at that and go, hey, how can I be more of a specialist than a generalist? Because, the moral of the story is specialists make more than generalists every single time. And it's a hell of a lot easier to market yourself too, right?
Absolutely.
Trying to be everything to everybody is just too difficult and you get nowhere. So
you not only look with in line with that, and you're so right. I mean, you're spot on. Like we remember there was a time, right, when there was somebody that was teaching traffic. You wanted to learn how to generate traffic, right? There was, hey, traffic. These are traffic, methods, secrets, whatever, right? Well, what happened? It splintered, and then it became right, like organic, and then paid, right? And then there was a time when it was like, hey, I want to learn how to use paid traffic, and then it splintered, and then there was Facebook, and then it was retargeting on Facebook, and right, and so it always splinters as it evolves. And I think that when it comes to positioning and where you play a role in the marketplace, you need to be aware of where the market is at right now, also where it's going, where it's been, and you really want to catch a trend going up. The other thing, like you said, which is again totally spot on, is it's brutally difficult to try to be all things to all people, right? Because you end up with marketing messages that just don't resonate with anybody because you're trying to talk to everybody. And when you're trying to talk to everybody, right, you're not really pinpointing a specific audience and what they want and what they're feeling and their issues and their obstacles and their frustrations. And so narrow is so much better, so much easier, so much more effective. And again, like you said, everybody needs to keep their finger on the pulse of their market on a lot of levels, but specifically in where is the market going? Is it splintering again? Are new opportunities for more specialization opening up? And if so, it's worth considering.
Okay, so now let's talk about customer acquisition. So this is obviously where you've focused, and frankly, this is where I think most people fail miserably. Is getting those initial customers. But before we throw terminology around customer acquisition campaigns, right? But like it's just common language. What exactly is a customer acquisition campaign?
Yeah, it is so funny, right? We talk in these terms that sound like, everything sounds so official, customer acquisition, right? We're talking about generating new buyers, right? Like we're talking about marketing that generates new buyers. And I'm not talking about any one particular model. Like I'm not a believer in one particular type of campaign model, or what some people would say funnel model. People ask me all the time, they'll say like, is it better to do a webinar? Is it better to do a video sales letter? And while there are some nuances in some markets, depending on demographics and whatnot, and experience and sophistication with technology, the reality is that I'm really model agnostic, because at the end of the day, like what people think is they think often they'll run a campaign as a webinar, or let's say as a video sales letter, let's say a video. And then they think it doesn't work. And then they think, you know what, let me take this video and I'm going to turn it into a long form sales letter. That's the key. The key is that, right? The problem is that I'm delivering it as a video. And if I take this same message, same offer, same everything, and deliver it as a long form sales letter or as a webinar, that's going to fix everything. And the reality is that the fix isn't in the model or the model change. A good campaign, a good message, a good offer can be delivered via a number of different models, a number of different mediums, a number of different ways. And so for me, very simply put, a customer acquisition or client acquisition campaign is a campaign that you can bring to the marketplace, use paid traffic or media buying, same thing. And you're able to acquire new buyers or generate new buyers at a reasonable cost. And what a reasonable cost is, we can talk about, is different for every business. That's what I mean when I say customer acquisition.
And we'll get to that cost because that's always a question that exists out there. Now, the thing that I really like what you said there is your kind of method agnostic, because again, people, and the thing that frustrates me in this space is you hear people talking in absolutes. This is the best way to convert right now.
Yeah.
When in reality, different markets respond differently to different things, and everything has their place where something might work better than something else. But the real root message our listeners need to take away from that is it's not about whether it was a webinar or a VSL or a long form sales letter. It's whether or not your offer is good.
Yeah. It's whether, like, look, I'll say this to sum it to your, and again, you're spot on. And really the reality is, right, everything that we're going to talk about on here, everything that you're going to ask me, you could share just as good, if not more eloquent than I could. And so, but you're spot on. Like, look, number one, we'll just boil it down to the essence for just 1 second. So number one, right, the one of the most valuable lessons that I learned over this almost 2-decade journey was a lesson that I learned from a gentleman by the name of Mark Ford. He's, New York Times, Wall Street Journal best-selling author. He used to publish under the name Michael Masterson, the guy behind Agora, just a tremendous entrepreneur, legend in the world of direct response. And I had asked Mark one day, and I tell this story all the time, but there's value in this. I asked Mark, I said, how did you help grow Agora from this $10 million company to, today a $1.5 billion company? And I fully expected him to say, right, we had a ton of money, we had, a ton of great marketers, or we had, a gigantic email list or something like that. But he didn't say any of that. What he said to me was that he said, Todd, we realized early on that we are really in the idea business. We're in the idea business. We're in the business of developing interesting, compelling, emotionally charged, unique, often contrarian ideas at the root of everything that we do when it comes to marketing, whether it's an email, whether it's a blog post, whether it's a video, whether it's a long form sales letter or webinar, it does not matter. There is an underlying idea, what sometimes some people refer to, they talk about it as a hook, the angle, the perspective. The underlying idea behind a campaign, the quality of that idea ultimately determines the success of the campaign, because it ultimately determines whether you get attention and create engagement, right? And so we could have a great offer, but if we can't get attention for that offer, then we're going to struggle. And so, right, the quality of the ideas, the angles, the hooks, right? Are we developing things that, in terms of ideas that are new, unique, fresh? Are we bringing kind of a perspective, a story, a narrative, an angle that is different for the prospect, something different from what they already heard already? Or are we bringing an ordinary common idea to the market? Like, are we talking about the same thing that everybody else is talking about from the same perspective with the same story? Because, and here's one little finer point that I just want to make, often what happens, man, this is so interesting to me. I'm so passionate about this because I've seen this played out so many times. what often happens is a lot of entrepreneurs and marketers, they don't understand the importance of the underlying idea behind their campaign. And just to make sure everybody understands, in this context, I'm not talking about coming up with a whiz bang idea for your product. I'm not talking about the latest innovation or disruption in terms of your product. I'm talking about the idea underneath the marketing message that you are bringing to the marketplace. Well, often when entrepreneurs don't understand the importance of the idea, they start with an ordinary idea, a common idea, or a commoditized idea, an idea that the market has heard, seen, right? It's all over the place. And what those entrepreneurs or marketers then attempt to do is they attempt to take that ordinary idea and make it sound exciting. They try to make it dramatic, and they try to do that with hyped up, hyperbolic, exaggerated copy. So they're using excessive adjectives and adverbs and puffery, and they're blowing it up, because what they're doing is they're starting with something that is really ordinary. And the only way for them to try to make it feel extraordinary to the prospect is in the language that they use, is in the words, is in the copy, right? And so when you have this hyperbolic, exaggerated copy, it tends to stem from a weak, run-of-the-mill, ordinary idea. But when you start with a good idea, you don't need this exaggerated, puffed up copy to make it sound exciting, because the idea itself is exciting to the marketplace. And so we are then able to take that idea, that great idea, or what Mark referred to as a big marketing idea, which is emotionally compelling, intellectually interesting, new, unique, fresh, timely, right? We're able to bring that idea and let it shine through with plain language, like simple language, easy to understand language. We're able to use our prospects' language and not write copy, but we're able to just bring it forward. I say to our clients all the time, our clients and students, that if it sounds like copy, if it reads like copy, it's not good copy, because good copy doesn't sound like copy. Good copy doesn't feel like I'm reading copy. And so I'm sharing all that in this context just to make one point, that we need a good idea, right? Like, so you need a good idea that's going to grab their attention, that's going to give them a reason to pay attention and engage. Just to do this quickly, you need the lead of the campaign. The first 350 to 400, 500 words is all about setting the emotional hook, meaning it's all about turning that attention into engagement by really, in for lack of a better phrase, teasing the prospect on what it is that we're about to show them, share with them. And then we go into, or we need what I call a campaign argument, which demonstrates how and why our solution is not only different from everybody else's, but superior when it comes to giving the prospect what they want. And then we need a great offer. And it's those things combined that you need, right? And look, if those things are banged up, or are missing, are lacking, I don't care if you change from a webinar to a VSL, you're still going to have a problem. You print a book as a hardcover, right? Print it up as paperback, it's still garbage. Put it on Kindle, it's still garbage, right? And so, right, changing the format of delivery doesn't fix the thing. A bad story is a bad story, whether you're reading it, listening to it, watching it. If it's a bad story, it's a bad story. So you got to start all that, and then I'm going to stop rambling. All that is to say that the underlying message, which includes the offer, is where the money is made, man.
Yeah, well, 100%. And I've always said to people, look, it's easier to sell a good offer with shitty ad copy than it is to sell a shitty offer with good ad copy.
Amen. Amen. You're so right.
And you just watch, there's so many people out there trying to hawk the same crap, as you said, but with the puffery and stuff. And honestly, I think one of the other issues we've had, particularly over the last few years, is this whole concept of funnel hacking, which is, and I know this is not how the whole ClickFunnels guy means to present it, but people are like, just find out what the other guy's doing that's working and knock them off. Right. And copy it. Right. And that's not necessarily a recipe for success either. So look, one of the best ways I think, to drive this into people's heads is, can you give us an example of, a client that wouldn't mind you sharing, that came in with an offer that had a shitty hook that you were able to re-engineer, and what did that transformation look like? Is there anything off the top of your head that that you could
Yeah. Wow. There's so many. Let me see.
I'm sure.
So I'm trying to think of a simple example. So yeah, let's take for example. So here's a client. This is if this isn't a great example for you, then you let me know and we could come up with, or I'll share another example. So we have a client who teaches how to play piano. And the typical approach starting out was how to learn to play piano in X period of time, right? Like the typical kind of promise-based hook. And then it was all about how anybody can learn to play piano in a certain period of time if they're willing to learn, yada, 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 right? So very simple, straightforward promise of learn to play piano in X period of time. And then this message was about how anybody can learn to play piano, and here's why, and here's what it, here's how it can enrich your life, yada, yada, yada. And so what we did was, one of the first things that we start with is we identify for clients, and this is, I'm going to share what folks can do. We identify what I refer to as their unique mechanism. So for this particular client, it was asking this client and unpacking, what do you do in terms of helping people to learn how to play piano that is different from what the others do out there when they're teaching piano? There's a lot of people that are teaching how to learn to play piano. So what is different about your method? Now, the first thing, Derek, that I just want to say for everybody, the reason why this is important, why we dive in here, is because there are only two ways to differentiate a campaign today. You can either differentiate with your promise, meaning the promise of result, outcome, transformation, right? That's what the prospect cares about most. They want to know the typical, what's in it for me? How is this going to solve my problem? How is this going to give me what I want? Right? What's the change? What is the promise? What are you promising me? And so you can either differentiate with the promise, or you could differentiate with the mechanism. The mechanism is how your product or service works to deliver the promise, right? How it actually works. What's the formula in your blood pressure supplement that allows it to bring down blood pressure? If you're a massage therapist and you can alleviate low back pain in 45 minutes, what's your process? What's your method of delivering that body work? Do you use a combination of body work? Do you use, your elbow, your knee? Like, what is different about the way that you delivered? If you've got a software application that promises to get top Google rankings, is there an algorithm behind it? Is the reason why it works because of the formula that it's based on, or because of the 18 points that it uses, right? So you can either differentiate with the promise or with the mechanism. Today, differentiating through the promise is extremely rare, right? That's typically when you hear USP, unique selling proposition. A unique selling proposition is really nothing more than a unique benefit, meaning a benefit that only you offer with your product or service, and it's not offered by another competitor. Right. And so when you have a benefit that a positive outcome, result, transformation that you could promise that nobody else in your market is promising, and it's something that your prospect deeply cares about, that's all you need to differentiate. Right. But that's rare today. Today, right, because of the volume of products, volume of marketing. Today, that is rare. You typically only see it now in green markets, like new markets, in true innovations, disruptions, right? Which means that we need to differentiate through the mechanism, through how our product is able to deliver the result. And to just fast forward for 1 second, you heard me say earlier when we talked about the one of the pieces of the campaign argument, and I said that our job is to show them that our thing is not only different, but it's superior, it's better. When I said our thing, I really meant the mechanism. So with this piano client, we said, right, we dug into what's different about the way that you go about teaching people, helping people to play piano. And it turned out, without getting too much into the detail here, that there was like a color type of method that he used. He didn't use the typical approach. He was using colors, with colors on their fingers, colors on certain keys. And so his methodology was this, for lack of a better phrase, this color method. So then what we did was we unpacked, well, tell me why it works, like why this method is the method that you decided to use and not the typical. What is it about this method that makes it easier for children to learn to play piano? Why is it more effective at making them, proficient in playing the piano? All that. So we interrogate the mechanism. Then what we did was we changed around the campaign to really have the promise of learn to play piano thanks to this new mechanism, this color approach to learning piano. And then we changed the campaign to be focused on why that color method was or is not only different, but how and why that difference makes it superior. So we build in contrast, meaning contrasting like what this does that the other approaches or mechanisms don't do, why this method is easier to learn with the brain, with the way brain is in children is designed, yada, yada, yada. Now, one of the things that I want you to understand is that the beauty of that type of campaign is that we're not pitching a product. We weren't talking about his product when we're doing that. We're talking about the mechanism. And so we were able to take him and position him with this marketing message as a guy who has a new and different way, which happens to be better for children to learn to play piano. And here's why it's better. Here's how it works. Here's where it fills in the gaps, like where all the pain points associated with the typical approach to learning piano. Here's why this circumvents that. Here's why this is able to produce results. Here's who this can work for and why it can work for them. And so ultimately, right, by the end of that portion, right, folks want to learn, to understand his color method, his color approach. Mm-hmm. And then we built an offer behind that. Obviously, that's the offer portion of the campaign, where now he had a bundle that he actually did it with a phone call, but where the offer is really a bundle that teaches people the color method. So the point, the one little subtle point that I want to make is that the mechanism is not the same as the product. The product contains the mechanism. The product teaches the mechanism. The product equips the prospect with the mechanism, but the mechanism and the product are not the same thing. And so what that allowed us to do and allows us to do, and this is the same process that we use over and over and over with all of our clients, regardless of the niche, marketplace, content, material. What it allowed us to do was put together an education-based marketing message. Education, because it wasn't about his product. It was about his method, the mechanism. He was a man who was introducing a new, different, and better way for these kids to learn to play piano. And he was explaining, unpacking, teaching why it was superior, how it worked, why it worked better. And in the process, he was giving the feeling of discovery, the feeling of these aha moments, like they were learning something, they're getting something valuable. And because he's not pitching a product, he's educating, the sales filter is lower. But at the same time, we're using education-based marketing, meaning what we're educating on is the mechanism, right? Which ultimately leads the prospect to, in the end, want the mechanism. And now the only place that they can get the mechanism is with his offer. So what we've done is prior to the offer, we've really pre-sold on the offer because they now see the value in the mechanism. They understand how it works and why it's superior to everything else. And so now they want it, right? Before we go into the offer, before we ever even talk about the product or the offer, they now want the thing that the offer is built on. And we've created an all roads lead to him, because the only place that they can get that mechanism is through him. Sure. So they can't go to Google and find it from somewhere else. They can't go to Amazon and find it from somewhere else. They can't go to YouTube and find it from somebody else. So we created this. So that's an example of, of one client, and really that process and that kind of formula, which is obviously a high level view of the formula, is the same formula that we use over and over for our own stuff, with our clients, with our students, same exact formula.
That was gold. For everybody that was just listening to that, rewind this and listen to that again, because I mean, what he just walked you through is how to take an offer that's not converting, dissect it, and turn it into something that works. And I see it all the frickin' time. People do not get this. They do not put the time in to figure out what their unique mechanism is, well, actually, let me ask you this. What happens when you see a product and maybe there is no unique mechanism?
Yeah, well, so it's a great question. So, and I get this all the time.
Yeah.
So a couple things. So number one, right? Unless you're selling a pure commodity, you're selling a glass of water. I can't even say anymore a gallon of gasoline, because today some, gasoline companies have these additives in there that they claim make the engine cleaner, run smoother, whatnot. But unless you are selling a pure commodity, there is a mechanism in there. Even, like you take somebody like a chiropractor, a lot of chiropractors, and hopefully this will be valuable for your peeps, right? So a lot of chiropractors, they'll say, they provide chiropractic care. They'll say, like, I don't do anything unique. I provide chiropractic care, right? And there's tons of doctors that provide chiropractic care, right? And in their mind, what they're doing when they're doing their marketing or when they're doing their educating, they would say, I'm trying to convince somebody of the value of chiropractic care. I'm trying to sell them on the value of chiropractic care. And I say to them, no, you're not trying to sell them on the value of chiropractic care. You're trying to sell them on the value of chiropractic care with you, right? Because if you persuade them of only the value of chiropractic care, all you've done is really sell them on the commodity of chiropractic care, which now they could say, thank you so much, Dr. Bob. Now I'm going to go and see Dr. Jane, who's closer to me than you, or Dr. Mary, whatever, who is closer to me, or who's a friend of a family member or whatnot. Thank you. You convinced me that chiropractic care is the way to go, right? We don't want to convince people of the commodity. We want to convince people of the proprietary, of us. So I would say to them, number one, you want to educate people on what they can expect to experience, the promise, the outcome, the result, the transformation with chiropractic care with you. Now they would say, well, when we talk about the mechanism, I said, well, unless you do everything exactly the same, like every other doctor around you, down to the second, down to the way that you onboard a new patient, the assessments that you do, the order in which you do those assessments, the order in which you do your chiropractic adjustments, unless you do everything down to the second, like everybody else does, there is a method to your madness. You're doing something different. Now, what we need to understand is, why do you do it that way? So why do you do these 3 assessments when you get a new patient? Why do you do them in this order? Why do you do this one first? What does this one tell you? What does this one tell you? Why do you do them this way? Then when you adjust them from the neck down or whatever. Why do you adjust them from the neck down? Why do you start there? If that's your approach, right? Do you do any kind of muscle stim afterwards or massage? Why do you do that? Why do you do it that way? And through that, what I call interrogating their approach, their method, we identify, right, their method, their approach, right? Even though they started off thinking, I'm just offering chiropractic care. But again, they're offering their approach to chiropractic care. And so in many cases, the overwhelming majority of cases, when folks say, like, I have no unique mechanism, they do. They just don't understand how to dig in and look at it. And so does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. 100%. I've had this conversation with people. We dig in and there's something in there, but people just don't look deep enough to find it, or their brain doesn't work that way, right? They haven't been taught to look that way and think that way. And that's why listening to something like this is hopefully going to get people thinking in the right direction here and going, hey, how am I different? How can I position what I do as unique? And
let me say this. I want to add one other thing real quick, because this is so important to me. It's something, again, that I'm just so passionate about. So today, right? So I started talking about the unique mechanism, I don't know, 6 years ago or something like that. And really, originally, the idea behind the mechanism was something that I learned from Eugene Schwartz, author of Breakthrough Advertising, one of the greatest ad men to ever play the game. Breakthrough Advertising, by the way, for everybody, is the absolute best marketing book ever published, hands down, bar none. So since I started talking about the unique mechanism, a lot of people talk about the unique mechanism today. So it's become, right, more known, more understood. But the mistake that a lot of people make when trying to use this, they'll hear the unique mechanism and they'll kind of get the concept. And what they do is they will look at what it is that they're doing. Like they'll take what it is that they're doing, whether it's, completely common, they won't interrogate, they won't spend the time thinking, digging out the reasons why. But what they'll do is they'll slap a fancy pants name on it. And so they'll call it something different, right? This is the Derek and Todd method or whatever, right? Like the whiz bang method. And while that can absolutely work to get attention, where it falls apart, and this is why I call it a faux unique mechanism, because it looks like it's presented as a unique mechanism, but it's not. Where this falls apart is, remember, let's go back to the campaign argument, to the point where I am now going to prove to the prospect that my method, my approach is not only different, but it is superior to every other option out there. And by the way, just as a side note for everybody, this is an important point, because different, just showing that your solution, your method, your mechanism is different is not enough, because different doesn't mean better. Yours could be red, mine's blue. What does that mean to me as the prospect, right? So it's important to understand that we need different. That gets attention, right? Different. But what we really need is to prove superiority, because what prospects want is they want the superior solution. They want the best solution. Nobody goes out and seeks, there ain't many searches going on Google for the third best method to lose weight, right? No one wants the third best method. No one wants the second, right? Like, what's the second best way to save money? Nobody wants that, right? They want the best. Yeah. And where this faux unique mechanism falls apart is when it comes time to prove why this method is superior. If they haven't spent the time interrogating and all they've done is slap a name on it, well, now what? How are you going to prove to me that it's superior if you haven't uncovered the reasons why you do what you do, in the order in which you do it, over the timeline, the way that you do it? See, the interrogation not only allows us to discover the unique mechanism, but it also gives us the ammunition that we need when it comes time to prove why it's superior. Because for everybody listening to this, if they've got a method, an approach, a system, a framework, a process, whatever, right, as part of their business, as part of what they do, if they're a coach, a consultant, an expert, an author, a speaker, an info product creator, whatever, right? Well, I would have to believe that the way that they go about doing things, they are doing it that way because they believe that it's the best way, right? If you're teaching a process, you're teaching that process and not a different process because you believe that the process you're teaching is the best. And so, but why? Why do you believe it's the best? And that's where the majority of people haven't spent the time interrogating, right? They haven't, right? Why do we do it this way? Well, when you spend time asking yourself those questions and interrogating and unpacking the reasons why, well, now I have the reasons why that I can present when it comes time to prove it. The reason why this is better is because. The reason why this produces more consistent results is because. The reason why this works faster is because, right? You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, yeah, 100%, 110%. All right. Okay, so cool. Look, again, I'm just sitting here taking notes. I mean, just incredible for everybody listening. This is just incredible. People would pay a lot of money to hear what you are hearing right now. All right. So, that said, I mean, we've been going at this now for just about 45 minutes. And I have one more question that I know is looming in people's minds when we talk about acquisition and customer acquisition. And that is cost, right? Like acquisition means buy, right? So we're going out and effectively buying customers. And so what is your general rule here as far as expectations in terms of ROI, in terms of how fast you're making back your investments in that marketing budget?
Yeah, I love this question, man. And first of all, I also kudos, dude. I love the way that you said, we're really buying customers, because we are, right? Like we are. So this is my favorite topic to talk about as it relates to acquisition, because of really how flawed my thinking was for many years. And it's the same kind of flawed thinking that the majority of entrepreneurs hold on to. And it's really because there's few people out there that are unpacking this.
Mhm.
So first, let me start with this. I said that one of the greatest lessons I learned was about the idea, right? We're in the idea business. Well, one of the other just tremendous game-changing lessons that I learned was to think in this way. And what I'm talking about is to recognize that as an entrepreneur, here's how I want you to think about acquisition. Here's how I want you to think about your business in general. You are an investor, and you are investing in the acquisition of assets. Those assets are your clients, your customers, your buyers. Those assets have a value to you today. Those assets put a certain amount of money in your pocket today. Those assets also have a cost for you to acquire them. And then those assets also have a future value, right? A value to you, assuming that you're going to continue to have a relationship with them. There's a future value. There's a value in 30 days and 60 days and 90 days and so on. So again, right? You're in the business of acquiring assets. Those assets have a cost. Those assets have a value the day one or day zero, we call it, the day that you acquire the asset, and then they have a future value. Now, as investors, right, we make investment decisions based on, right, what is an asset worth, right? What do I believe the asset is going to be worth, and what is it going to cost me to get that asset? Now, typically, with the typical stock investor, they understand what the cost is. They understand what the present day value is, or like what it's worth today, right? Mm-hmm. But the future value is a speculation, right? Most are investing that they're going to invest in something today because they believe that it's going to go up, right? And they have factors that they can show you of why they believe that it's going to go up, right? Well, the difference is in the direct response business is that we're not basing that on speculation. Over time, as your business grows, becomes more sophisticated, as you get more customers and clients, you're going to know what the average buyer is worth to you. You're going to know what the average buyer is worth to you, or the average customer, the average client is worth to you in 30 days, in 60 days, in 90 days, and so on, right? You're going to know that. It becomes trackable. In the world of direct response, when it comes to metrics, we use averages. So we're not talking about some may spend $2,000 with you, some may spend $100. Maybe your average value is $500. Right now, oftentimes that's referred to as lifetime value. But the reality is that there's a value to a customer at different time intervals. Yeah. There's, right, when I get a customer, there's a value of that customer at 30 days. There's a value of that customer, that asset at 60 days. There's a value at 90 days. Sometimes it might grow significantly. Other times it might not grow significantly. Then we have, of course, we have in the marketing world, we have today's value, what that buyer is worth to us today. Now that's typically referred to as average order value. Average order value is the average amount of money that a buyer spends with you when they go through a campaign, right? So if you've got, a core offer, right? And you've got, let's say, 2 upsell offers, let's just say, as an example, in a campaign, just to give an example. Right. Well, some people that buy are just going to take advantage of the core offer. Some are going to take advantage of the core and one upsell, and some are going to take advantage of the core and both upsells. Regardless, there's an average, right? We average it. So we don't look at the top. We don't look at the bottom. What's the average? What is the average amount of money that a buyer who goes through this campaign spends with you day zero, the day that they become a buyer, right? So we'll have a number, it's not subjective. It's an objective data point that we know the average buyer will spend $100, let's just say. Well, now, without going too far down this rabbit hole, and if I do, you reel me back in.
Keep going, man. Keep going.
Now, what we do is we use what I call acquisition aggression. And acquisition aggression, there are 3 levels, and it really tells us how aggressive we are going to be when it comes to what we pay to acquire that buyer. So let's break this down a little bit. Let's just say, to keep things real simple, we have an average order value of $100. That means the average buyer that comes through this campaign spends $100 with us on day zero. And let's just keep things real simple and say, that they purchase one more time from us on average. Some will purchase two, some will purchase none, but let's just say they purchase on average from us one more time 30 days from now for another $100, meaning that the average lifetime value of a buyer is $200, right? Let's just say that, just to keep things simple. So day zero, they're worth $100 to us. 30 days, they're worth a total of $200 to us, what they paid on the first transaction and then a month from now. So now there are three different levels of acquisition aggression. There's the mom and pop entrepreneur, which is the typical entrepreneur, the brick and mortar business owner. The way they operate is they want a profit margin on every sale, right? So they may say, if every buyer is worth $100 to me on average, I'm only willing to spend $50 to get that buyer because, or to produce that sale, right? Like I want a margin on every sale. To the mom and pop, there is no front end, there is no customer acquisition and back end, customer monetization. It's just transactions. And on every transaction, regardless, they want a profit. So let's say if they want a profit on every sale, and the average new buyer spends $100, let's just say that they are only willing to spend $50 to get a buyer. They're only willing to spend $50. A buyer is going to be worth $100. There's their profit, right? So now understand that mom and pop is only willing to spend, or able to spend $50 to acquire a buyer. Now at level 2, we have break even. Level 2 is where I have all of our clients begin. Level 2 is where we're willing to break even on the acquisition of a buyer. That means, and on day zero. So that means that if a buyer is worth $100, if we have a $100 AOV, that means that we are willing to spend $100 to get a buyer. That's what's referred to, by the way, the cost to acquire a buyer is CPA, right? Cost per acquisition, just to make sure that your peeps understand that. Cost per acquisition, that is what does it cost us on average to get a buyer? We have the cost side and we have the revenue side. On the cost side, CPA, cost per acquisition. On the revenue side, we have AOV for day zero. So what that means, if we want to break even, is that whatever our AOV is the maximum amount of money that we can afford to spend to get a buyer. If our AOV is 100 and we're willing to operate at level 2 and break even, that means that we can have a CPA, a cost per acquisition, up to $100. At $100, right, we break even. Now, for most people that hear that, they're going to say, that's insane. Who would do that? Well, you're acquiring buyers, you're acquiring customers for free. Your bank account is no less today than it was 2 days ago. You're acquiring those assets that we know are going to appreciate in value at no cost. It's like, would you acquire a stock that you believe was going to go up in value if it didn't cost you anything, right? If you put out 100 and you made 100 and now you own the stock, your bank account is the same as it was a week ago, only now you own the stock. And so you only have upside with that. Well, of course, right? And so that is break even. And then level 3 is where you not only use 100% of your AOV to determine what it is that you can pay in terms of CPA, but you use 100% of the AOV plus a percentage of the lifetime value. So let's go back to our example for a second. So we said that in this example, we had $100 AOV and then another $100, right? A $200 lifetime value. Now, maybe we are willing to invest, let's just call it $150 to get a buyer, because we know that that buyer is worth not only $100 on day zero, but also another 100 in 30 days, a total of 200. So we're willing to invest, right? As an investor, would you invest this? If I said to you, would you invest $150 today if in 30 days you got back 200? The answer would likely be yes. The only question would be, right, how often do you want to do that? How often can you do that, right? Because depending on your cash flow, right, you might not be able to do it all that much. Because remember, you're laying out money, you're floating it for a period of time. And so, right, like just like if I said to you, would you give me $1,000 if I would give you 10,000 in in 6 months? The answer would be yes. But the question for many of your listeners, for many of your peeps, is, well, like, right, you have a limit to what's in your bank account. And so can you do that at scale? my point in sharing this is that is the process for determining like acquisition for what you can afford to pay, right? It's all about, it's all the game of investing. It's all numbers. That's all it is. And so there's a cost to acquire this buyer, right? There is a value to the buyer, and then there is a future value. And the thing that I want everybody to understand here is this, that the more you can afford to invest to get a buyer, the easier this game becomes. So if we look at those three levels, right, and we compare them, let's say in the same business, same everything, except the mom and pop is only willing to spend 50 to get a buyer. The break-even entrepreneur is willing to spend 100. Right off the bat, they have a massive advantage because they can spend $100 to get a buyer. The mom and pop can only spend 50. So the break-even entrepreneur can do things that the mom and pop can't, can invest in direct mail and lumpy mail, can pay more expensive traffic sources, platforms. They can do things because they're both trying to acquire the same buyer, but one is only willing to spend 50. The other is willing to spend 100. When you can spend 100 to acquire the same buyer that a competitor can only spend 50 to acquire, you have a monster advantage. Now, when you go over to the level 3, who's willing to spend 150, who's willing and able to spend 150 because of the value of the asset to them long-term. Now they have a monster advantage, right? Like a monster advantage when they could spend 150 and they're competing against people that are only able to spend 50 or 100. They can spend $150 to acquire a customer. See, the more that you can spend to acquire a customer, the easier the game becomes. The lower your conversion rates can be, the more expensive your clicks can be. Like, right, the game just slants in your favor. That's the process.
So for everybody listening, I love everything you just said there. It aligns with what I always tell people: whoever can spend the most to get the customer is always going to win in the long term. Yeah. And I think this is a real eye opener for people that are new to this, and they set up their AdWords account and they're like, holy crap, it's $5 a click. How can anybody make money with that? Yeah. And I think in any market, the more competition that comes in, ad costs rise. And if you're not thinking in terms of exactly what you just talked about, you're eventually going to get squeezed out of that ad buying market, and you cannot grow, full stop. And
absolutely.
The other thing that I just want to highlight that you said that is so important, because I anytime I talk to a group of, new entrepreneurs online and I talk about paid media, they go, well, God, how much should I be budgeting every month? And what you said there is perfect. It's not about, but it's about cash flow, right? Yep. When you can find an offer that you can run and buy traffic, and it's going to, if you spend $10 today, make, $100 in 60 days from now, it's how often can you spend $10? Full stop.
I mean, and really, you're so spot on, man. Like, right, here's the reality. So, because I get that all the time too, the budget question, or I get the question of like, hey, it cost me $5 to get a click. Is that good? Right. And so let's talk about those two very quickly. So first of all, let's start with the $5 a click. Is that good? Well, you can't answer that question, right, with only one side of the equation. You've got the cost side. You don't have the value, right? Is $5 a click good? Well, it depends. If every click leads to an average of $10, then heck yeah, pay that $5 every day. But if that click, right, if you're paying $5 a click and it really only leads to, on average, a return of $1 for every visitor, well, then that's a problem. And so you can only say, like, it's just like, I have an average order value of $50. Is that good? Well, it depends. What's your CPA? What's it costing you to acquire a buyer? If you have an AOV of 50, but your CPA is 300, no. Right. But if your AOV is 50 and your cost per acquisition, your cost to acquire that customer is only 20, heck yes. So you need both sides of the equation to understand that, right? Like, because there is no such thing. It has to be within context. You can it's only good or bad based on the other side of the coin, based on the other side of the equation, right? So there is no such thing as like, that's too much money, like just by looking at that one side of the equation, right?
Mhm.
You have no idea, right? I would happily pay $10 a click if I made back $10 every click,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
Like, I don't care what I'm paying. Like, I don't care about the specific number. I care about, am I trading $1 and getting back at least $1 plus a buyer? Whether if I trade $1 and I make back $1 and a buyer, that to me is the same as if I trade $20, get back $20 and a buyer.
Yep.
Both of them, I acquired buyers at break even. The other thing is the whole budget idea, right? And so the question is this: if every time you spend or invest $1,000 on Facebook ads or YouTube ads, whatever, you make back 1,000 in the form of sales and new buyers, should you have a budget? Why would you want a budget? Why wouldn't you just do that as often as you possibly can?
Mhm.
Right? You're turning over the same dollars, like you said. And so it doesn't make any sense to say we're only going to invest $10,000 for the month, let's just say, in doing that. Why? If you put out 10 grand and you make back 10 grand, why should you cap it?
Mhm.
Right? It makes sense when you're using brand institutional advertising and you don't know your return on
Sure.
investment. It's not trackable. It's not quantifiable. But when you're doing direct response, what we do, it only makes sense to look at the ROI. Look at, are you operating at break even? Because if you are, do it all day, every day, as often as you possibly can.
And for all listeners, this is the secret behind billion-dollar companies like Agora, like
Yep.
Ranker. They're using exactly what Todd is talking about here, and they've mastered the ability to stack offers and maximize their lifetime value so extensively that they can go and outbuy anybody. I mean, I know guys that have, financial sites and stuff like that, selling leads to, certain Agora properties, and those guys will pay a bloody fortune. And you're like, wow, they're spending a lot to buy, but they know exactly what they're going to get out of that. And they have no issue doing it. And that's it.
That's it. You said it, man. That is it.
Yeah. I just want everybody this is probably one of the most valuable interviews I've done, because this just breaks it down. This is the truth. There's no secret money/traffic fairy out there. You got to learn how to create a real kick-ass offer, right? And then once you build that customer acquisition funnel, whether it's break even or you're going in the hole, that's okay, as long as you're going to make that money back over the lifetime. And that is how you build and scale a real digital business. And every single guru that you follow that's legitimate, because there's a lot of legitimate one that's made 7, 8, 9, 10 figures online. Well, maybe not 10. This is what they do. They've already figured this out. So I cannot emphasize how important what you've heard here is today. Now, as we wrap this up, Todd, how can people connect with you? How can they learn more from you? Hire you?
Yeah, they could go to toddbrown.me. They can search on Facebook also we got a cool private group where we share just a bunch of stuff. I think it is MFA Nation, or like I said, just toddbrown.me, and they'll be able to learn all about what we've got going on. But I hope that this was valuable for everybody. And I really hope, my hope is that, that I didn't overwhelm anybody. I just think that I spent so long, man, on when starting out on just nonsense that feels right, but it's just not. And so I'm so passionate about, really helping folks see what the right way is. And I think very similar to you, sometimes you got to give tough love. You got to be real. You got to be honest. Like, people ask me all the time, like, like, what's the push button? Is there a button? And I'm like, look, if there was a button, I wouldn't even be on this interview right now. I'd be hitting the button, man. You better believe that I'd be hitting it. I'm not teaching you something that seems like it's difficult, because I like things that are difficult. I like things that are easy. I like things that work. But if there was a button, I'd be pushing it and I wouldn't be on this interview right now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
and
be
I
hanging
tell
with you.
anybody about that button. You know, it cracks me up. I can't tell you how many times like I've, you know, spoken at a live event and I've done a conference and I've talked about kind of exactly what we're talking about in this process and, you know, building the entire, you know, the lead acquisition and media buying and all this stuff. And then I have somebody come up to me after and they go, look, this was great, but what's the shortcut?
Yeah.
It's just like, oh God.
Yeah, I'm like, you're killing me. You're killing me inside. You're killing me slowly inside when you ask me that. Like, because you know, you know, I wish there was. I wish there was. I'd be the first one in line, man, to jump on it. Yep. And if somebody finds the shortcut, I haven't been able to find it after almost 20 years. And so if somebody else finds it, please shoot me an email, direct message. I'll be the first one to listen.
and guys, for everybody's listening, you guys, I'm like a broken record, right? It's not about learning how to, you know, place Facebook ads or learning Google AdWords or driving traffic or building WordPress. That's not what's going to make you money. Full stop. You can outsource all that shit. At the end of the day, what is going to make you money is learning how to craft kick-ass offers and how to get those, how to sell shit, right? How to create an offer and how to get people to look at that offer and take action. All that other stuff, you can hire people to do it. But the one thing as an entrepreneur that's very difficult to hire people to do is to come up with a really good strategy and offer. That's what we do as entrepreneurs. So, Todd, thank you.
My honor, dude. I was so thrilled to jump on with you, dude. And I can't believe that it's been 5 years. We definitely have to make sure that we chat a lot sooner than another 5 years from now.
For
next one, I'm gonna have just like hair on the side of my head. I'll look like Kris Kringle with the beard. And so we've definitely got to do it much sooner, man. But man, what an honor. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to come on here and just share my craziness, dude.
Well, that's amazing. And loved having you on. And yes, we're going to do this again. And it's not going to be 5 years. So for everybody that's listening, guys, show notes, all the URLs that were mentioned and stuff will be on projectignite.com as they always are. Again, I'm serious. Like, listen to this again. If you're out going for a walk or you're driving in your car listening to this, that's great. But listen to it again with a piece of paper and a pen in front of you and take notes, because this was a crash course in how to be successful online. And I mean, from how you have to think about it to the actual practical, what you need to do here. So if you're not getting the results you wanted in your business, what we talked about here is probably going to get you to the root of that problem. So as always, this stuff only works if you make it work for you. So now it's time to take what you've learned and take action. And if you like what you heard, please leave me a rating, leave me a review, 5 stars, preferably on wherever you listen to your podcast. And that's a wrap. We will see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to another info-packed episode of the Project Ignite podcast with Derek Gale.
Any links mentioned, along with an entire transcript of this episode, can be found at projectignite.com/podcast.
And to make sure you never miss another episode, go to iTunes or SoundCloud now and subscribe.